Hello everyone and welcome to the 2025 Wolfenden Lecture. I'm Al Laville, I'm the Associate Pro Vice Chancellor for Diversity Inclusion here at the University of Reading. And you may have heard of the name Wolfenden before, so it's in memory of Lord Wolfenden, who was the previous Vice Chancellor here at the University of Reading. And his critical and crucial work led to the decriminalisation of homosexuality in England and Wales, which was a criminal offence until 1967, which I think is really important for us to remember, and the hard-fought equality protests and action that's taken place since. So my first Wolfenden lecture here at the university is back in 2018, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Matthew Toresen today, whose bio I'm not going to pretend that I've memorised, but I do have it here. There's lots of great parts to it. So Matthew was born in 1962 in Tripoli, Libya, and Matthew's life has been shaped by global experiences, activism and deep passion for equality. His early interest in the natural world led him to study zoology, which I'm pleased to also with psychology, and a psychologist myself, I think that's really exciting. I'm here at Reading, where he became actively involved in LGBTQ+ activism. He was the chair of Reading University's Gaysoc, to co-founding Nottingham's first LGBTQ+ youth group. He's been at the forefront of key movements, including the really important fight against Section 28 and the push for equal rights. With a career spanning sexual health advocacy, community building and photography, which I'm excited to hear more about later, Matthew's work documented and shaped the history of LGBT+ activism in the UK. And his contributions have been recognised, such as in 2016 when he was awarded an MBE for services to LGBT equality. So we have about 38 minutes, Matthew's lecture, and then I'll be passing over to my colleague, Dr. Ruby Zegler, who's the chair of our LGBTQIA+ staff network, to facilitate the Q&A, and then I'll be back at the end. So over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much. Can people hear me? I'm allegedly mic'd up, so that's, if you can hear me, that's brilliant. It's lovely to be back. I haven't been back to Reading for 40 years, which is, I'm ashamed to say. I've been through it on a train and watched the skyline change over the years, but I've never actually been back. So when I jumped off the train earlier today, it was like being in a completely alien city. It was really strange, just seeing a completely different landscape. I wandered around, found the jail, and I found the giant lion statue, and I thought, okay, yeah, I'm sort of connecting with town now. And actually coming back up to the university was great. Actually getting off the bus, I got the bus up here. This is how proletariat I am. Got the bus up and walking up Queen's Drive and actually starting seeing the sports buildings and things I recognised was amazing. Being back here is fantastic. So thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm not sure which way the clicker goes. No, the clicker goes the other way. There we go. Does it? Clicker goes the other way. Does it go the other way? Oh, there it goes. It does go the other way. This is a very personal journey I'm going to take you on. I've been fortunate enough to be connected to some major things that have gone on with the LGBT world as we've moved through. This is me at the age of 10, living in Singapore with I said always connected to the natural world. This is my lizard Charlie, who I loved very much until he escaped and then kept on popping up in the drains around the house and waving at me, and I could never get him back. So he lived a nice wildlife afterwards. But I've always had an affinity with the natural world and with wildlife. And from that comes a sense of compassion and fairness, I think, which actually followed me through when I started my coming out journey and has translated into humans beyond animals. More of animals later, as you'll see as we go through the talk. This is me at Reading University. Fresh-faced, innocent, young, hadn't come out at this point. This is prior to coming out. Did zoology and with psychology, absolutely fascinating subject, loved it. Still in touch with people from my course now. My very good friend Sal, who was on the same course as me, we're back in touch. Went and saw her recently. She taught me to flick snails on the driveway before you get your car out so that they release and then you move them to one side. It's that compassion. I love it. I love the people I met here. You can see what's happening here, can't you? You can see what the journey I was on. This is post coming out. This is my associate member of students. I've still got this card. I found it before the lecture. I was amazed. I was trying to find a photo of me. So yeah, this is probably about 84, 85, I think, just after graduating. I came out in 83. I'd been a student volunteer with Nightline. I assume it's still going here, the student counselling service and support service, I don't know, but Nightline was very big back then. And one of the people who came to speak to us at Nightline as volunteers was a guy called Richard from Gaysoc. And he started talking about what he'd gone through, and I just thought, he's talking about me. These are my feelings. This is what he's talking about. After that session, I got in touch with Gaysoc, met Richard and Donato and some other people who were really key members of it, and said, I think I might be gay. I think I might be bisexual, gay, I just don't know. I had a girlfriend, Christine. I'd been with Christine for years, since being about fifth form at school. The feelings were so strong. I'd never done anything about it. I'd never had any experience with a man whatsoever, but the feelings were so strong. I met Christine in London, and I said, I think I'm bisexual, and I don't want to do anything about that. I'm seeing you, and I'm not going to do anything about it behind your back, basically. So lots of tears, lots of confusion. Went back to tell my mum for some reason. So I can't remember now. So Christine and I went back to Northampton to tell my mum that I thought I was bisexual, which I did at the time, because I was very much in love with Christine, but I was very confused. I phoned her up and said, we're coming back, we've got something important to tell you. By the time we got into my mum's house, she was knitting booties, basically, assuming Christine was pregnant, and that we were going to have to deal with that. So the news of my potential bisexuality and the fact that Christine and I were splitting up was a big shock, because Christine was my future wife, I think, in my mum's head. This is what, 40 odd years ago? We'll get to things later on in the talk. Christine and her husband came to my wedding, which was absolutely fantastic. In 2014, I got married, and Christine and her husband were at my wedding. And it was just a beautiful circle to me, actually coming around. And people can be friends in your life through whatever you go through. And that was a real eye-opener to me, that had that courage and that beauty and that passion was just amazing. This is me in this is me in about 1984. You can see I'm really in 1985. You see I'm really going for it now. I'd fully embraced the 80s, the whole gender bender thing that the tabloids are talking about. Clubbing, you'd see people like Boy George, you'd see Marilyn, you'd see Lee Bowery in clubs in London. It was a very exciting time, very glam, very fun. So that was about as glam as I got back then. But this is, you can see the journey through my days at Reading University. In 1983, I attended my first Pride. Tiny, a couple of hundred people marching through London, ending up at the University of London. A photo I took from the Pride window. These people watching the end of the parade come in through the building. I liked it. The badge then was a pink balloon, pink plastic balloon with that logo on. Please note it was lesbian and gay pride. We hadn't embraced bisexuality. We hadn't embraced the trans community. We were only lesbian and gay. And politically, that kind of made sense back then. This is a historical talk, obviously, in the historical times. This kind of made sense. So the age of consent was 21. When I came out, I risked prison. There were real battles to be had. After this, I went to a conference in Belfast where Ian Paisley was outside with banners saying, "Save Ulster from sodomy." We had banners in the windows going, "Save sodomy from Ulster," fighting back. And it was a really interesting, frightening time. And a bisexual man came out in one of the big sessions, and a load of women stood up and walked out. They would not share the space with a bisexual man. Our inclusivity was very different then. There were real battles between sort of the feminist movement, the lesbian movement, gay men, trying to find common ground. It was a very, very interesting time. And some of my talk, and you'll see, I apologize, is male focused, but that was my world at the time. That was what I was trying to establish myself in. By 1985, I'm a photographer as well as doing other things. I got my first gay news cover. This was really important to me. I'll tell you why. Before I came out, I was walking around the student union and there was a little newsagents and shop in the student union, and this punky looking guy, I never saw him again, never since, never again. This punky looking guy walked up to the rack of newspapers and took off a copy of Gay News from his top shelf, flicked through it, popped it on the counter and paid for it. My jaw was on the floor. I couldn't imagine how anyone could be that brave, that they could just buy a blatantly gay magazine, put it on a counter, pay for it, and walk out reading it. You know, why hadn't the world ended? Why wasn't he beaten up? What was going on? I was absolutely in awe of this. I never got to meet him, never knew who he was. He wasn't part of Gaysoc, no idea who he was. But that memory is very, very strong for me. And not that I buy many magazines now, but if I do decide to buy a copy of Gay News or Attitude or something like that, I will buy it, I will flick through it, I will plonk it on the counter, and I will pay for it. Just on the off chance there's someone looking at me going, oh my God, how brave, how could he do that? Because it's really this random act just stuck in my mind. So when I got the cover of Gay News, I was really proud. It was a really important moment for me. Moving on, this is my first book cover. This is a book of poetry by Neil Powell called True Colours. Photo of an ex and a friend of mine called Ford. And it was really interesting how I was trying to almost establish my identity through photography, try to understand eroticism, identity, politics, music. So I was really, really trying to establish myself, and I've done quite a fair few book covers in my life, but obviously, again, this is a really, really important one for me. It was the first one. Moving on, the first big campaign I came involved in, I said I was part of Gaysoc here at the university when it was Gaysoc. We were very interested in what was going on politically, and then the Thatcher government introduced Section 28, Clause 25 to begin with, I think it was, then Clause 27, then Clause 28 as it moved through legislation, preventing the promotion of homosexuality as a pretend family relationship. And it was awful. What we see now, of course, in Trumpian America is actually Section 28 on steroids, where they're actually going for diversity, equality, and inclusion, or inclusivity, without defining it. So you're seeing information about civil rights, presumably around Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, the Black Pride movements have been stopped. You can't have Black Pride Month, you can't have Pride Months, you can't talk about women's achievements, because anything that gets away from white male supremacy isn't allowed now. And you see companies like Meta, Google, McDonald's, all falling in line and getting rid of their diversity programs. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And for global companies who then want federal contracts in America, will they start rowing back their equality and diversity to fall in line? I'm not sure where this is going, but Section 28 was bad enough, and it only targeted us, whereas this is targeting a wider movement. So Stop the Clause was a movement that came out of Section 28. Lots of badges, lots of posters, lots of activity, and then Manchester, 20th of February 1988. The Northwest Campaign for Lesbian and Gay Equality called a rally outside Manchester Town Hall and a march through. I was living in Nottingham at the time, and we had our Stop Clause 28 before it became Section 28, with the amazing lesbians dropping in. We used our handmade flyers. Look how cheap. We had no money. We had photocopiers and Letraset and little typewriters trying to make flyers. But we were keen, we were very passionate. So the lesbians who've actually done this talk, the Wolfenden Lecture, who abseiled in on the BBC and the House of Lords to complain about Section 28, we use them. It's the last lesbian drop-in. I'm so sad I actually kept the ticket, the bus ticket to go to this event. There's a book being published on Nottingham history, and I've sent a load of these things through to them. But 20th of February 1988, I managed to get a press pass for that. Still got my press pass as a freelance photographer, which is really exciting because I got access to all sorts of areas, which is amazing. So here's the march. It was thousands, about 20,000 people, I think. And my first prize march was a couple of hundred. This was 20,000 easily. So here you've got quick roll call. The guy from Brookside, who was the lover of Stefan, somebody, I think his name is, I forgot, I meant to look him up, I do apologise. You've got Michael Cashman, you've got Ian McKellen, so you've got Peter Tatchell, all doing the march. But even more exciting, well, you're going to go, ooh, at this point, is me. I was so excited. I'm going to go back and look. I sourced this image for this talk, and I sort of triggered, and I thought, hang on a second. I was looking at it, I thought, yep, definitely me. I had bleached blonde hair at the time, holding my camera, that's how I hold my camera. So, yeah, I'm very proud of that image because I was actually there, obviously, so that made me very happy. In terms of Section 28, there was so much movement. This poster was the cover of Heartbreak Hotel magazine. This was published by Don Melia and Lionel Gracie Whitman, two Americans who'd produced magazines called Strip Aids, Buddies, and then they produced Heartbreak Hotel, drawing on lots of cartoonists and artists, showcasing many people for the first time in their fight back against Section 28. They also created Artists Against Rampant Government Homophobia, ARG. Heartbreak, this one was designed by Jamie Reed, who did the Sex Pistols cover, God Save the Queen, the most probably famous punk singles cover of all time. And Alan Moore, the comic writer, was also involved. More of him later, but it was a really passionate time. Incredibly creative, incredibly powerful to be involved in. I mean, I couldn't believe, sounds stupid, I couldn't believe my luck, but actually what this did was galvanize the gay community in a way, the lesbian and gay community, in a way that hadn't been happened. We've been knocked sideways by HIV and AIDS. We were bashed, people were dying, and the Conservative government at the time thought, what a great thing, we'll just bash them even more. You know, the enemy within, punch down, find someone you can have a go at. And I promise you, the LGBT community are always first on that list. We're really high up on that list. And unfortunately, trans people are now leading the way. That's what's really happening now. In America, Trump's gone after trans. You know, the Stonewall riot monuments, say, have removed Q and T from it and from the websites. They've been written out of history. Absolutely shaming. So that's our next fight. When I first started writing this a few weeks ago, making some notes on this before Trump got in, I was really excited. It was all going to be, oh, haven't we done a great job? Look how far we've come. And then day after day, I've been battered and battered and battered by this. And it's why the important that we carry on fighting. Mentioned him earlier, Don Melia, American, he produced Strip Aids, died in 1992 of AIDS-related illness. Amazing man, a powerhouse of actually drawing the community together and getting artists involved. These are the next few slides are portraits that I've done, which then formed an exhibition in 2018 for the 30th anniversary of Section 28 called Outlaws, which was, I think I called it Activists, Artists, Friends and Lovers. And then just loads of different black and white portraits of people who've been really important in my life as we move through. Don Melia is one of them. Peter Tatchell, we were talking before the lecture started about how important Peter Tatchell is. I'm honoured to call Peter Tatchell a friend. He's been a guiding light for me in terms of his passion about human rights, not just LGBT issues, but human rights. The man who tried to arrest Mugabe and got punched to the ground, suffered brain damage from that attack, lives his passion. Some of us dip in and out and have the luxury of maybe not doing anything for a couple of years if we don't feel like it. He lives it day in, day out. Absolutely incredible, incredible man. Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen, mustn't forget the Sir, again came out in '88 in response to Section 28, went on to co-found Stonewall, campaigning group. So again, a figure who's actually came out of the closet because of Section 28. Very nice man. Cooked me chicken nuggets after I took this photo, because I was hungry. So there you go. Very nice man. Jimmy Somerville, absolute hero of mine. Was in Bronski Beat, The Communards, Small Town Boy, a classic song. Again, very kind to allow me to photograph him. Lily Savage, backstage at Pride, when you could get Pride passes, when people like me could just write and say, can I have a backstage pass to come do some photos? And they'd give you one. No way is that happening now in a million years. Not happening, just not happening. Michael Cashman, again, another co-founder of Stonewall. For those of you old enough to remember, 40th anniversary this year, I think, for EastEnders, groundbreaking gay character. Him and Barry the Barrow Boy, they dared give each other a peck in one episode. And what do we have? Scrap EastEnders. Scrap it. Lovely Piers Morgan wrote this. About how dare yuppie Colin and Barrow Boy Barry have a peck on the cheek. Ban it, it's disgusting. Sun headline as well, EastEnders. Absolutely shocking. We've kind of moved away from the blatantness of this, but it still exists. It's more insidious now, the way things are described, but talking about a bit more activism, this was in Nottingham when we evolved just after Section 28. This is 1990, I think. So after Section 20 had gone through, we still had a very active community in Nottingham, and there was this awful syndicated article that apparently said we were horrible people, and so we went and had a sit-in their offices. And it worked. They gave us a right to reply and apologise profusely to our faces. Again, I don't know if that would happen now. You wouldn't get past security. There was innocent days. We just rocked up on about 30 of us and went into their offices and sat down until they gave us a right to reply. But it felt very empowering at the time. I've touched on this. You can't have lived through the 80s and the 90s without being significantly impacted by HIV and AIDS. What I didn't mention is when Christine and I went back to see my mum, after we'd had that quite upsetting chat, when Christine had gone home, my brother then gave me the towel that I had to use for that weekend because he assumed I was going to give him AIDS. Well, it wasn't even AIDS back then. This is 1993. It was HTVL3. It was gay-related immune deficiency. Americans were dying. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how it was transmitted, so the fear levels were huge. I remember going to a sexual health clinic here in Reading, and their advice to active gay men was, don't sleep with Londoners or Americans. That was the sexual health advice. They were working in the dark. Absolutely. I was actually seeing an American student at the time, so okay, right. So not great, but survived. But this is the ACT UP slogan, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, harnessing the pink triangle. I've had some pink triangles made recently. It was the symbol of the 80s for me. It was the gay men symbol. The mark that was used to mark out homosexuals in Nazi concentration camps. And it was a very powerful symbol during the 80s before the rainbow took over. So everything is rainbows and unicorns now. And I suddenly felt I really needed to connect back with my roots. So I actually went and had some pink triangles made. And I struggle with this, but I think interesting, just maybe when we open up to questions, I'm a gay man of a certain age, and I'm finding some of the inclusivity so huge that I'm not sure how we all work together anymore. My issues as a middle-class, white, privileged gay man are a world away from a teenage dual heritage trans person, for example. And I'm wondering, our commonality has become so stretched that maybe it's not useful. I have the luxury of disappearing back into the closet if I want to. I have the luxury of being a cis gay man who can push activism as far as to get what I want, if you see what I mean. And I'm very aware of that. What I want from society as a cis middle-class white gay man is not going to be enough for a lot of people, but it's enough to keep me happy. And so my activism has limits. And I think that's a real problem for me and for others. So whether we need to regroup that movement and work out how we could work well together or not, I don't know. I don't know. I'm interested to hear questions at the end. It's something I struggle with coming here today, thinking, I don't want to make out that I'm some great, social activist. I know my limits, and I know how far I've gone with things. This is an ACT UP protest. My involvement with a lot of these organizations as a photographer was actually being a photographer, capturing moments like this. This is my ex-husband in the middle, Scott. So capturing moments like this that we could then take in case people were arrested and in case people were charged. So I had a very sort of a hands-on and hands-off approach. I was always there running around to making sure things recorded. And I remember going to an anti-apartheid march in London, and some photographs I took of a friend called Jeff at that meant that he wasn't prosecuted. He was arrested and charged, and actually my photographs proved that he wasn't where the police said he was. So it was like, results, But you realize, and now, and this, we're talking about film cameras, we're talking about dark rooms, we're talking about printing by hand, not the digital stuff we've got now. So it's much easier, I think, to monitor protests now. But it worked. People didn't get sent to prison because of my photographs, again, which I'm proud of. The final campaign that I've been involved in that I want to talk about is Equal Love. This was launched in, I think it's October 2010, by Peter Tatchell, who we've seen earlier, and building on some of the work that he'd done with Outrage, which is a really great campaigning group during the 90s. They put the camp back into campaigning, and they'd really looked at marriage as an issue. They'd had many sort of sit-ins and protests and people going and wanting to get married and dressing up and everything, but it never moved anywhere. And organizations like Stonewall didn't seem to think at the time that marriage was an issue for us as a community. We'd had civil partnerships had come in 2005, and which gave us legal protection, which is great, but we didn't have marriage. So Peter put out a call, are there any long-term couples out there, both heterosexual, bisexual, lesbian and gay, who haven't had a civil partnership and aren't married and want to challenge the law? 8 of us came together, 8 couples came together. Myself and Scott were one of those couples. And in true Outrage style, we did things like march up to our local registry office and demand to get married, followed by a film crew. They'd say, no, you can't. We'd go, oh, no, and it would make the local news. If any of you are getting involved in campaigning, the weirdest thing you're ever going to be asked to do is walk slowly towards the camera, normally towards the camera. It threw me. You have all these film crews saying, yeah, we just need some cutaway shots. Can you point at rings? Can you look over there? Can you walk slowly towards the camera? It is so bizarre. Practice it. If you're ever going to get into campaigning, practice these things in advance. I swear it'll come back and haunt you. It's so difficult to walk slowly and naturally in front of a camera. But 8 couples were chosen, and we started taking the government to the European Court of Human Rights. We put in our application. It was under the name Ferguson and Streetzel. They were the lead couple on it. I don't know if it would have got anywhere. I'll be brutally honest with you. We lodged it. Whether it would have been taken seriously by the European Court, I don't know, but we lodged it. And that was part of the tactics as well. It's not all about the success. It's about keeping it in the press. It's about keeping it in the public eye. So that's what we did. Shortly after this was about 2011, shortly after this, David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, got behind the campaign anyway, not our campaign, but got behind the issue anyway. And actually, the law moved much faster. Stonewall then claimed all the credit for it. I think it was a bit unfair of them. They certainly did a lot of lobbying, but there were lots of us involved. Us, other campaigns, not just Equal Love, there were other campaigns doing things as well. And I think all of that pressure moved the dial. Stonewall was certainly important, but they did claim all the credit at the end. But I think some of us also were involved. Wedding shot, Northampton, Guildhall, surrounded by lots of lovely people. And we were married on the day the law changed, the 29th of March, 2014. Weren't going to. We'd taken part in the campaign, but we don't really want to get married. We'll spearhead the campaign. We don't actually want to get married. It seems it's very much of a heterosexual institution. And why do we want to do that? We're queer men, and we don't want to do that. And then we thought, you know what? If one of us dies, families can swarm in and take over. And we've seen it happen with people dying of HIV, where families take in and control the funerals and wiped everything out. So the registry office actually phoned and said, do you want to get married? We've got a slot on the day the law changes. We went, okay, this is 3 months beforehand. You try organizing a wedding in 3 months. Oh, no. I used to take the piss out of people when you worked in big offices and you have people saying, I'm planning my wedding and it's going to be in 3 years' time. And you go, oh, for goodness sake, what are you talking about? Yeah, there's a reason for that. It's really hard to find a venue with a couple of months' notice. Luckily, because of my work in Northampton and some connections, the Guildhall, we had that. They even laid on security. They thought there were going to be protests. So when people arrived, there were people in jackets like that with clipboards saying you're on the list. It was really, sort of like a Hollywood-y type thing. It was really strange, but there were no protests. Everyone was fine. Everyone had a lovely time. We had belly dances. We had it worked. It was really good. My marriage has since ended in true normal style. But we were together for 30 years, so not a bad innings. But and we still live together. For the sake of Cooper, the dog, which I have to get a slide to Cooper to every single thing I do. So we still live together. We still co-parent Cooper, who's amazing dog. I'm going to bring it to a close in a minute or two. I wanted to end on something that's quite strange. Well, hopefully not strange, but hopefully thought-provoking. I mentioned Alan Moore earlier, an amazing character. If you don't know much about Alan Moore, do some research. Anarchist, magician, alchemist, comic writer, V for Vendetta, Watchmen, amazing things he's been involved with. He's written a huge book on Northampton, of all places, which is thicker than the Bible, called Jerusalem, amazing book. And he's also written a stunning book called The Mirror of Love, which is, I had the pleasure of interviewing him for an event we did. We had a lesbian and gay literary festival in Northampton for a couple of years, and he was our guest speaker. He was kind enough to come along to it. And he said, what shall I do? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, I've written this book about homosexuality and lesbian and gay life, because there wasn't anything out there. I did some research and there wasn't anything, so I wrote one. It's like, okay, fair enough. That's one solution to it. So he wrote the Mirror of Love, and it's like sort of it's not a poetry book, but a book of sort of verse, I suppose, and just outlining LGBT experience. And the final page of that book is just a couple of lines that he wrote. And it's we had it as a reading for our wedding. I phoned Alan Moore and said, yeah, we're getting married on the day the law changes. Can we use part of the Mirror of Love? And he was lovely and just said, with my blessing, you can use it. And it was like, oh, wow. So I'm going to end on this poem. So I'm hoping everyone can read it from there. Thank you. I think love is everything, so thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Matthew. I don't know if we can get some lights on so I can see people. So as Al said, my name is Ruby Ziegler. I chair the LGBTQI+ staff network. It's an interesting point that you made about inclusivity and the way the community works, and hopefully it will come through questions. It is a real life challenge. Can I invite people first here in the room to ask questions? If we have a few, we may bunch them together, and then if people are watching this on live stream, you can also put your question there, and we've got someone in the room who will field those in due course. So Matthew was actually very diligent, and very much kept to the time we're even slightly under. So we've got plenty of time for discussion. So any questions? So Parvi.
Matthew, thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear your story. And you touched on polarisation we're experiencing in society at the moment. There's quite a bit of discussion about
Parvi, can you just wait for the microphone so that they can hear you on live stream? Maybe
it's wonderful to hear your story, Matthew. There's a lot of focus on the polarisation we're facing in society. You touched on that in your talk and how to deal with it. And it's being suggested that in order to make any progress, we should perhaps move away from talking about underrepresented and disadvantaged people and start focusing on fairness and justice for everyone. Do you think that is the narrative to work with, or do you think we'd be losing something by doing that?
I think you're right. There's that temptation to move away, isn't there? It's really difficult because by focusing on underrepresented, we focus on difference. We really highlight difference rather than highlighting ability. I'm torn. I'll be really honest. I'm knee deep in this. The job I do at the moment is all about. I work for the Northampton Police. We do positive action work, which is really around underrepresentation within the police and fire service and what can we do to move the dial on that. And it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle, mostly because people coming forward from underrepresented groups don't want to be thought of as different or special. They just want to do the job. Unfortunately, the landscape they're coming into doesn't perceive them in that way. And we have two things buffering up against each other. And what we are getting, not necessarily in Northamptonshire, but all over, and certainly in the States, is that everything they're doing is now being screened. It's unfair to white men. And that's the thing. It's not fair. It's not fair. Somehow, all of these programs that are actually trying to encourage people to go into careers they've never thought about before, take risks, and it is a risk. You know, if you're from the black community and you go and join the police, for that example, you are going to lose friends, you are going to lose family members, you are going to lose all sorts of things. And what replaces that? A service that may be slightly racist, that's not welcoming, that sees you as a diversity hire and not someone with a talent. Why would you bother? You know, why would you bother putting yourself through that? I think language is really important around it. I don't think we're there. Not being very helpful. I don't think we're there, and I don't know. I had a conversation on the way here with a colleague actually about thinking, should we move away from the whole language around DEI? Because we know it's in the firing line. Right. Should we try to switch it and smoke and mirrors maybe? But we're still dealing with fundamental unfairness. We know we are. I don't care what Trump says. We know we are, and to back away from that seems ridiculous to me. You've got to acknowledge the unfairness in society. You've got to.
Thank you. Very good. So there's one question over there.
Can you hear me? I'm slightly hard of hearing, so I can't tell if you can hear me. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Matthew. I thought your lecture was great. My name is Kieran. I'm from Law School. I really quite liked your point. I think your acting was very good on the campaign thing, so congratulations. My question is kind of campaign related. I see that in recent years, the Pride movement or movements like them have tended to say that we represent all, but there's been a kind of backlash in the community saying, well, do you really represent everybody in it? And I wonder whether or not campaigning, I'm trying to formulate my questions as I say it, do you think there needs to be a change in the way that campaigning takes place and that campaign is effective? And do you really believe that people listen to these campaigns? We live in an age of oversaturation in social media, whereas contrasting with the era that you were speaking of, where you had posters and you were very active, because the only mean you could be active, and you could occupy a council office where, as you say, you couldn't get through the glass door now. What needs to be done to make campaigning more effective? And is it effective in our current times?
I think what works in campaigns is an element of humour. I think what's dangerous is when you go very, very, very serious. Even though they're serious campaigns, serious issues, when you get very, very serious, you see people polarise and feel they're being attacked in a way. I think that was what was really good about outrage back in the day. And oh, sorry.
That's the point. Save answer from sodomies and
yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Just you've got to turn it slightly, and it doesn't mean you don't deal with serious things in a serious way, but people are very quick to put shutters down and feel alienated. And if you can get around them by pointing out the ridiculousness of something, or the stupidity of what they're not stupidity of what they're saying, but there's a situation where we're living in a world now where, less so with this government yet, not within this country yet, but going harking back to the States, where you turn on your own people. And that's where really interesting campaigning comes in, where your own government turns on you and makes you the enemy within. That somehow you are dangerous, you don't deserve tax dollars to be spent on you. Little did I know that when you came out as gay or trans, you got to stop paying tax, apparently, because it's always someone else's tax dollars that apparently we're squandering on our services. We don't spend it. If I'd known that, I'd come out years earlier and save a fortune. So it makes you really cross when you're marginalised. And I think the way to respond to that is creatively, and we are in a really different era where we're bombarded with images, we're bombarded with fake news, fake imagery, fake sound bites. It's so hard. Bring back the days of a photocopied poster and something sprayed on a sheet that you could put out a window. Because actually it was fun as well, because anyone could do it. You didn't need to be a tech whiz, you just got on and did it. Campaigning does need to change, but I think the really, really, really serious campaigning does tend to alienate people. If you can get someone talking and laughing and thinking about it, you see them shift.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Other questions? Are there any questions online?
Should wait for the microphone. I'm allowed now.
Can we get the microphone to Al? Thank you.
So we have a comment online, which I think is really nice, because Matthew is relating to walking into the store and being able to buy a magazine and being confident how to do that. So Peter comments that years ago, I remember how apprehensive I was going to the Gaysoc bookshop in Marchmont Street, London, and now I'm just walking about further forward. It's great to hear from you this evening. And I wanted to, firstly, that's really commentary how I acknowledge. But I think for me, it made me think of reflection as well. So when I was going to college, university, I was working there in Smith, where you'd have sort of gay times attitude right at the top. And that feeling of wanting to be part of the community and read more, but then also feeling almost that, feeling a bit hot actually within yourself in terms of that pressure of people looking. I'm going to use that comment to go around to a question in terms of
through all of your working at activism, could you pinpoint the time or a series of times where it actually switched for you in terms of thinking apprehensive in regards to being in those spaces or buying into publications to, you mentioned now it would be fine, but what was the sort of...
Oh no, I think I'm still apprehensive.
Yeah,
I'm still apprehensive.
fair
Yeah, no, I think that there's still a bit of courage to go buy gay news in Tesco's. I think you never know who's behind you. Yeah, and so I think it's still a brave act, and it's something I like to do. But I think it makes a statement. And I agree with that. Going to Gaysoc Bookshop, a wonderful workplace. Everyone should. If you haven't been, go to Gaysoc Bookshop. It hasn't changed in 40 years. It just hasn't changed. And of course, it was where a lot of the lesbian gay support minors came out of. Pride 85. Again, I was at Pride 85, and that's the weird thing. Apparently, it was a groundbreaking moment when the miners led the march, and you watched the film Pride, and you realise how important it was. I think I was just there with a can of cider, dancing around, having a great time. You don't realise that actually this was a pivotal moment in LGBT history, the fact that the miners would come out and support the gay movement, and the NUN then changed its policy around LGBT rights, or LGBT rights back then. So it's fascinating, you can be involved in sort of historical moments and not have a clue going on around you. But again, there was a great badge shop in Covent Garden as well. So all sorts of badges, like I remember being there, and this bloke wanted up to the counter and put a badge on the counter. And the quite like the counter said, "How much is the I'm discreetly gay badge?" So those shops are great, and support your local businesses if you can in that sense as well. Yeah, absolutely. But I think you do it every day. I mean, I'm almost kind of invisible as well because of my age. I think you disappear back into being slightly more invisible. So I'm not a threat to anyone as I talk around in my life. Whereas. So I can still do those kind of slightly bold acts of buying a magazine and kind of throws people, and I still talk about, if Scott and I are out somewhere, someone says, "Oh no, this is my ex-husband." So we make ex and husband, but you're making a point, and saying it out loud. I think those things are really, really vital because every time you keep silent, people will assume something else. So it's really important to make that stand.
Do you have space for another?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. So, just have another one that's come in. So, I was wondering on your reflections on the impact of tech on the LGBTQ+ community. Has the rise of the app world reduced a sense of community, and how has it affected relationships in your view?
Oh, you're asking one of the least tech-savvy people. A friend did come round and show me it wasn't Grindr, it was something else. And he was sitting at home at night where I live, and he popped it on his phone, and half my estate lit up. And it's like, really? Where are these people? I have no idea. And we're an elderly estate as well. We're not like it's also a young up-and-coming area, so it surprised me. I think tech has probably slightly dehumanized it, and there's no going back. Let's face it, it's there. I remember coming to when I first came to it, and I don't know what the pub was called. I was trying to do a bit of research. There was a pub down by the station. If you left the station and went right, there was a pub down there. It was a gay pub, wasn't it? And it always had a sign up saying "your wedding party." And again, you couldn't see it like lots of pubs back in the 80s. It was all blocked off, so you couldn't actually. And the big sign would all say "private wedding party." It was always there to stop anyone just going in. And I remember going into that, and it was great. It was a melting pot of the gay community because there really wasn't anywhere else. So you got people in their 90s and teenagers all in there, and everyone talking and everyone mixing. I thought that's probably what you don't get on apps now because you're usually swiping and not interested, rather than talking to people you'd never normally talk to. So that melting pot was lovely. It's been amazing. Thank you. I was racking my brain to remember the name of the pub. I couldn't remember.
Can I throw in one question, Matthew? Relates to your point about kind of the wide community and wedges. So Trump, but not just Trump, is really quite literally trying to draw that wedge, right? So they have changed website designations, removed the T and the Q, but kept the L, the G, and the B, right? And we know this from movements and even organizations that use those three letters in this country. What do you think people or activists should be doing about this? How should they respond to this attempt to create a wedge?
I think for me, we're in really interesting territory now around trans and gender. I think we're in fascinating territory. And I think, unfortunately, our own community, let alone the wider world, is finding the debate really, really difficult. I've watched a couple of videos from the LGBT Alliance, just out of curiosity, about, what is their position? And they were, what they seem to be doing is fighting very much about the medicalisation again. And I was thinking, because certainly as a gay man, you have aversion therapy, you could have, you were seen as psychologically ill, we could see that it could be cured using medical interventions. And so that resonates really strongly, and certainly they're using those arguments around trans people, saying it's the medicalisation of young people who we should. I can see what you're doing, but I think there's a lot of debate that needs to be had here. And of course, I've got lesbian friends my age and older who are actually extremely threatened by the trans movement, and are refusing to talk to trans people, who will not accept those different gender identities. And that's within our own community. I think it's until we can actually start having those debates in a healthier way, then way before the wider world. We need to do it. We need it ourselves. We need it to have those things. Because what the wider world will do is sit back and watch us tear themselves apart over programs and stuff like that. They will watch us do it and love, basically. Because while we're doing that, we're not looking at the bigger picture of what they're doing. And Trump's got rid of the Q and the T deliberately because they're gender things. And now, obviously, if you're in America, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. Caitlyn Jenner is now presumably Bruce again. Flag waving Caitlyn Jenner, trans Caitlyn Jenner, presumably in Trump world, is now a man called Bruce. I mean, this is how weird we've gone. It's like saying you don't accept there are sparrows. Of course there are sparrows. Of course there are trans people. How we work with that and how people integrate into the communities, that's the battle. You can't pretend they don't exist. It's ridiculous.
Really interesting. We've got time for one or two more questions. So any questions in the audience? There's one over there.
Thank you for that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sometimes when I'm looking online and reading through comments, I see comments from older generation LGBTQ members kind of criticizing the newer generation, maybe calling them soft and saying, oh, you're talking about pronouns and talking about things like that when we were dealing with HIV and we were being beaten up in the streets. And you also even see it kind of taking a step more broadly with older generation professional women sometimes saying to younger generation women, oh, we weren't even allowed to get jobs. So what would you say to these older generations who feel like we need to fight the battles as fiercely and go through as much of the difficult parts? Do you agree? Do you feel like you are surrounded by a lot of people who do agree? And if not, what would you say to them? Thank you.
I think the battles are different. Yeah, I think the battles are different, and that's the key thing. And different battles require different strategies. And I can do that. Yeah, I was there, the barricades. Because it was I risked prison for my first relationship. I was under the age of consent, and even if you're under the age of consent, you were still sent to prison. Which is, just think about that for a second. You're under the age of consent and you're still imprisoned. That's how crazy it was. And HIV and AIDS caused so many problems within our community. What I'd really love to see, and I don't think it's done yet, Paul Burston's mentioned it in his book, We Can Be Heroes. the contribution that the lesbian community and women made in the fight and the care of people with HIV and AIDS. Yeah, it was a gay male issue mainly to begin with, certainly in this country of America, but the way that the women in the communities rallied around in a way that I don't believe if there had been an illness that was affecting lesbians, that gay men would have rallied around and supported their lesbian colleagues. So very different fights. And I can see why everyone's thinking, oh, pronouns. But that's the issue now. People's gender identity is very important. I was helping form youth groups in Nottingham and Reading and Leeds. I was involved in setting up pride movements in Northampton and the reissue of the pride movement in Northampton and Leeds as well. So there were about 15 of us on a picnic. That was the start of that movement. We had different priorities. We had different things going on. And gender wasn't there in the way that it is now. Sexuality was. I was working with young people in Nottingham and in Leeds, and there were young people who didn't have the vocabulary around gender. It didn't exist. So they were concerned about their sexual orientation. And now, suddenly, the world has opened up. And I helped set up a youth group in Northampton, and I went to visit it again. Like elder states were going to visit my little youth group, how you're doing, and all they're talking about is gender. None of them are talking about their sexual orientation. And I must admit, it knocked me sideways. It's like, what's happened? I didn't understand. It was because my battle had been about sexual rights. We were being imprisoned for our sexual orientation. That's what we were being imprisoned for. So the battles are very different, but I think it would be very demeaning for me to say, people just worrying on about this, that, and the other now. No, the battles are different. The importance that people put on them is different, which is why I said earlier, I think me as a middle-class, white, cis, gay man is probably not the right person to be trying to spearhead stuff around young people's gender debates and campaigns and everything else. I would be the wrong person to do that. I've done my campaign about things that are important to me and hopefully help move the world on. We need new generations of people who take up this battle and run with what's important to them, while keeping an eye on the fact that things can change very fast. Just think Trump, think America, don't ever let that fall out of your eye. That's how fast it can change here. With a change of government, that can change here fast, I promise you. Start with DEI and it will sweep out. It will. So that's part of a bigger debate. But I do. There's some old guard like me who probably are going to. But different arguments, different resources, different energy is needed now, I think.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I think we're coming to a close. Just before I hand back to Al, I thought also in the spirit of solidarity and of thinking about struggles in other places in the world, I thought it's worth a mention that a person who was dubbed the world's first gay imam, Muhsin Hendricks, was murdered a couple of days ago in South Africa, in Port Elizabeth, as he was on his way to conduct a same-sex marriage. This was a person who founded a movement called the Inner Circle, which was intended for queer Muslims to square their religious identity and their sexuality, and it's given shockwaves, I think, around communities, not just in South Africa, but around the world. And I just wanted to flag this. This is in a country that has same-sex marriage long before the UK, and that has legislation on anti-discrimination that is phenomenal. But the challenges and the dangers exist even in other places. So with that, I want to thank Matthew again and invite Al to give a vote of thanks.
slower than I normally am. Well, firstly, thank you so much for such an interesting talk, and thank you to Ruby for the facilitation of the Q&A and to everyone for their questions. I believe this is our final. Thank you. This is our final slide, just to highlight some of the events that are coming up. So you'll see, firstly, on the top left is looking at Every Mind Matters. So the university is very passionate about working towards improving mental health for all, but particularly children and young people. The lecture on the 6th of March. Going across your screen, we acknowledge and celebrate Women's History Month next month. Hilda Hodgkin-Bryan's story on empowerment. And on the bottom part of your screen, there's a children's lecture as well on the 3rd of April and the Community Festival in May. You can find out more details on our website, which is redmond.ac.uk. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and I hope you have a lovely evening.